Hello, everyone. Welcome to another installment of these World Fairs and a further look into the construction and design and I guess absolute grandeur of these things. So this episode, I was going to look into going into the Missouri World's Fair in 1904, but since the last episode, I've done some more looking around at the Chicago's World Fair, and it's fair to say it is a rabbit's hole. Like it's really one of those ones that the further you go into it, the more that it gets sort of uh, uncovered, I guess is a good word. And yeah, more to be seen. So I thought I'd start today by just having I guess, a look at what was built there, what's constructed in some of the artwork that we have from that period, and sort of fashion it to what's there now. So as you can see on the screen here, I've got a Google Map aerial view of the area of Jackson's Park, of which the Chicago World Fair was placed. You can see it's quite an extensive area. I'm looking west. So west is in this direction here. North is this way. So downtown Chicago is over here. You can see it over here. And then Jackson's Park is down here. So you can see the scale of it compared to the rest of the city. It's quite an extensive area. Now, there are only two buildings that remain, the main one being this Museum of Science. Check out this little graphic, it's pretty cool. Aerial. Have a look at that thing from an aerial perspective. That was just one of the buildings, not even the biggest building that was constructed for this World's Fair. Absolutely incredible building. And you see the two smaller buildings just coming off at two on the corners there. Such a cool little aerial flyby video this is. But the rest of the park here was obviously taken up by the rest of the World's Fair. So in comparison, you can see here, so the building that we were just looking at is this one here, over here. And so I'm sort of looking at it from a similar direction from the lake. This is a lake here. This was the manufacturer's building. I forgot to add in the previous episode. So this was the largest building in the world at the time. If it was still constructed today, it would be the second largest building still by volume in the world. First is the Boeing building, which I think is in Oregon or Washington State, perhaps. But yeah, if this was still standing today, it would be the second largest building in the world by volume. Absolutely incredible. So let's just go in a little bit closer. So you can see the wooded island, this island here. So that's this one through here. You can see how the waterways, canals. Have a look at these palaces that were built. Oh, it's weird. It's zooming out the other way. Around these waterways. And they're magnificent parklands and pathways and bridges, etc. The artwork, absolutely, it follows it all the way around. And notice these other buildings at the back here, which I only just noticed for the first time a couple of days ago. I'm going to go into further sort of look into those, but compare it to what's there now. It's just golf courses, just a big golf course. Still have the Museum of Science and Industry of Chicago. That's still there. And I think the other building may be this one here. I'm not too sure. It's a smaller building. But yeah, for all intents and purposes, it's just been turned into a driving range, tennis courts, some soccer ovals, baseball fields, and a golf course, and a little bit of a harbour. Yeah, I just found it quite interesting that it's, we've gone from this to this. Let's have a look at the Museum of Science and Industry. I'll drag the little man over so we'll get a better look at this thing. I mean, have a look at it. So apparently they say that this was the only building that was built to be permanent. They used masonry, so stonework, brickwork, etc. But all the rest of the buildings were made out of wood, jute matting, plaster, cement, and with a bit of white painted on them. I mean, some of the other images and we've seen in previous videos, I mean, it looks like the same construction methodology to me as the existing building. They don't look like different type of materials. It looks like the same style, same construction, same architecture. You can see the block work. It's quite obviously block work there. Some of these may have been precast and then installed on site, potentially. But who really knows, given there's no photos of the construction at the time. Magnificent building, absolutely stunning. And so we have the other smaller buildings up here as well. I mean, just them on their own. Quite magnificent. Like whoever built these were master builders. These don't seem like, they definitely don't look and seem like temporary structures that were just thrown up in a very short period of time. They were constructed by master builders. So you can see the extent of it. Flying over all of this constructed. Quite phenomenal, really. So I had a bit of a look into Jackson Park as well, so which it's suited on. So it states here through Wikipedia is the site of the World's Fair. After the state legislature created the South Park, the South Park Commission, in 1869, the designer of New York Central Park, Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux, were hired to lay out the 1,000-acre park, which included the Midway, I think that's Plaisance. I'm not sure if I'm not pronouncing it right, and Washington Park, which is what I spoke to earlier. I'm going to go into a little bit further with this as well. Louis Willie, that's a cool name. Oh, Louis Willie, explained in her book, Art's a Lady, Lois, in a book, Forever Open, Clear and Free. Olmsted said Jackson Park should be water-orientated with a yacht harbour, winding walkways around the lagoons, small bridges, bathing pavilions, and plenty of space for boating. However, their designs were not put into place at that time, and Jackson Park remained untouched until Chicago was chosen to host the World's Fair several years later. So that's stating that these park grounds weren't actually, there was none of this civil construction, the civil engineering construction of the parks themselves, until the exposition construction, meaning that these grounds were dredged, excavated, all the civil works, all the basically everything ground level and below was designed and constructed at the same times that these buildings were. So in the last episode, I spoke about how we can't underestimate and not forget about, like, we can get so focused on these buildings, but don't underestimate the work it would have taken to undertake the civil engineering of this, the civil infrastructure of these of these grounds, because it would have been an absolutely mammoth effort just on that on its own. So it's really two parts. It's the civil infrastructure, and then it's the buildings that it's constructed on. I did say in the last video, and I thought about it, I don't know if I feel this way now, but like that this civil infrastructure, so again, everything ground level and below, would have been harder than the buildings. I mean, normally it would be, because the buildings in today's world, the buildings we build are quite easy, quite mediocre and quite easy to install. But back then, and what we have here is a very, very different type of building, and they are superior construction methodologies used in this. So I'd say these buildings probably were a little bit more, as reference, probably a little bit more difficult to construct than the civil works themselves. Maybe it was 50-50, but either way, the two aspects of it would have been very, very difficult to construct and install. So going into this midway area, I'd only just noticed a couple of days ago this parkland through here. So you can see in these photos, you can see these royal buildings moving all the way back here. So that is this section through here. So this was also, I thought, when in my first two videos, as I've been looking, I thought the area that they had sort of developed as part of these World's Fairs was just this area in here. But it's actually all through here as well, and these parklands too, this Washington Park. So all of this was developed for this World's Fair. So this Jackson Park through here, which is some 600 acres, the Midway, they call it, through here, and also Washington Park. So what was the overall area? They said 1,055 acres, 4.27 kilometers square, which is 4.27 hectares of land, which is just a huge, huge amount of land. So this Midway houses you see the area here that houses, or on either side of it is the University of Chicago. So I was actually thought I'll zoom in and have a look at some of the buildings that were constructed there in the time. And I was actually really wasn't surprised given some of the stuff that's come up, but like you look at the architecture of this, and is this not the same to you as some of the buildings that we've seen in the World's Fair? Similar architecture, similar design. It's all very much the same. All the way along here. So University of Chicago, the University of Chicago was incorporated as a co-educational institution in 1890. Again, that same period, 1890, through American Baptist Education Society, using money donated from Standard Oil, which was John Rockefeller. So it's about that sort of 1890 period. So William Harper became the university's president on July 1, 1891, and the Hyde Park campus opened for classes in 1892, October. So what's that? 8 months before the Chicago World Fair was opened, this Hyde Park campus was opened as well. Basically the same timeline. So these are all constructed, apparently as is, for a separate purpose of the university, as the same time as the World's Fair. I mean, these buildings just look incredible. So my feeling is that similar to how these buildings had actually been here for decades or potentially centuries earlier, the same goes for this Midway Park and all the buildings that align it. This was some sort of palace grounds or some sort of palace area. See, I'd originally thought it was just this area through here, Jackson Park, and the 200 odd buildings that were built as part of the World's Fair. But it seems to me it was actually all of this included as well, and all of these buildings. This cathedral were actually a part of the same grounds, all the way out here through to what's now called Washington Park. So instead of 600 acres, which is what I believed, it's actually well over 1,000 acres of parkland. Very interesting. I mean, there's no doubting that this architecture here follows the exact same style that we've seen in the images we have for the fairgrounds. Maybe a little bit different, maybe just slightly different, maybe not the same type of, exactly the same type of Greco-Roman style, although there were Greco-Roman style type buildings there. In through here, it's a little bit more Gothic, perhaps. However, the design ideology and the construction methods look very similar to some of the images that we've seen through here. And bring up. And you see here, very sort of similar design. These archways, similar sort of archways you can see here. Through here. Very similar. So yeah, I believe that these buildings, along with all the buildings that were a part of this Jackson Park, and the land on which it sits on, were actually all repurposed. Because that just adds another dimension to it, right? It's one thing to have all this area developed through here and along. That's one thing to have that developed and all these amazing buildings constructed. But then to add is actually this area through here too, and all this area through here as well, which we know wasn't developed until these designs for these parklands and for the World Exposition were put forward in 1891, that it just adds to the immensity of the project. It would make much more sense that these were actually constructed, especially given there's no photographic evidence of any construction of these grounds. It would make much more sense that these are actually constructed decades or perhaps even centuries earlier. And then that the 2 years or 2.5 years the mainstream narrative states that it took to actually construct all this area was actually the time it took to repurpose and to fit out these buildings for this World's Fair. So yeah, I just want to have a look at that one today and share that with you. Just something interesting I thought. Like I said, it's a rabbit hole. The plot thickens when you realize that it's not just a certain section of it. It's actually another, almost double the area full of parkland. The idea from Olmsted originally was to have this as a Venetian waterway. So I'd suggest at some time this probably was a waterway and not a park. They may use it for drainage or something like that now. They may have like a drainage element to it. Perhaps there's some subsoil drainage or something like that running through there. But I would suggest the initial, before the World's Fair repurpose this, and the people who brought about that project repurpose this for the World's Fair, that this is actually a waterway canal coming through here, some sort of Venetian canal that worked its way all the way through. And there was most probably similar type of buildings, palaces through this area as well. I'll perhaps look and see if I can find any evidence of that, if there's any photographic or photographs or photographic evidences of what was on Washington Park previous to this. They say it was used for the World's Fair for other type of stalls. But yeah, there's nothing, doesn't look like there's much remaining now. So yeah, thanks very much, everyone. And until next time, take care of yourself, and we'll see you then. Bye.